Yes, when you hear that sound, you know the Sega Dreamcast is on and you're about to have hours and hours of fun. Welcome to a special bonus episode. This is number 22, I believe it is. My bonus episodes, I do one a month, talking about pretty much any topic I want to talk about. This month I decided to do my top 20 Sega Dreamcast games of all time, so let's get to the list. Before we get into the countdown, I do want to do a brief history of the Sega Dreamcast. It was only around a brief period of time. From 1999, it famously came out at 9/9/99. Everybody remembers September 9th, 1999. But by the year 2001, it was pretty much discontinued. I mean, I believe a couple games came out for it after that, but anything released after then has been what's called homebrew, where people make their own games. I see some really cool ones, by the way. I haven't tried it out yet because I have an emulator because I don't have a Sega Dreamcast anymore, sadly. But I seen they even ported GTA 3 to it. So, hopefully I'll play that in the future. But anyway, there's several reasons why it didn't last. One of the big reasons is because there was a lot of problems between Sega, the parent company Sega, which is based in Japan, and then Sega of America, which is of course the North American branch of the company that put out all the Sega games here. Of course, everybody remembers the big wars of the early 90's. Sega Genesis versus Super Nintendo. I mean, that was a hot video game war, and it seems like everybody had sides. I never really took a side on it because, full disclosure, I never even got to have either of them during their prime. I got a Sega Genesis and a Super Nintendo long after they were discontinued, just because, poor family. But, so I don't know which one's better. They both have their, their pluses and minuses. But anyway, then Sega started coming out with all the different stuff, the 32X and the Sega CD add-on, where the Sega Genesis ended up looking like a freaking Megazord from Power Rangers by the time they were done with it. But anyway, they famously rushed out the Sega Saturn right after this. It was either the Sega CD or the Sega 32X, one of the two, had just come out. They wanted them to rush here in North America to get the Sega Saturn out, when the Sega Genesis and all those peripherals they added still had shelf life. So Sega Saturn didn't do very well in the sales, and I owned a Sega Saturn once. I got it secondhand and never really had any games for it. I used it as a CD player, so I never really got to experience it. Maybe someday, hopefully I will. But like I said, it didn't have very long shelf life, and then they rushed them to put out the Dreamcasts not too long after that. So it's like they pretty much sabotaged their Sega Saturn. And then they finally came out with the Dreamcast, and one of the big things a lot of people say held it back is the fact it didn't have a DVD drive. It came out before PS2, but famously, PS2 had a DVD drive. Xbox ended up being able to play DVDs when it came out too. Although with the original Xbox, you had to have a remote to get the DVDs work, which is stupid. With PlayStation, you could get a remote, but it worked with the controller. But anyway, the DVDs were really hot at the time. Just like when the PS3 came out, Sony pretty much, they didn't pioneer the Blu-ray technology, but they really integrated it into the PS3, which became a big reason a lot of people got a PS3 besides, gaming. Like if it comes down, Xbox, what was it, 360 and PS3, a lot of people were like, well, they're both good. They both have good games. Both have exclusive games we want. But if we can only pick one, I'm going to pick the PS3 because I think Xbox 360 went with like HD something, some kind of disc, but it never really got popular. Sorry, I had to have a drink. But anyway, going back to the Sega Dreamcast, that's pretty much what happened to it. It came out after the PlayStation and after the Nintendo 64, and those were huge sellers. So it was already, those games are already, systems and games are already out, and people are enjoying them. So you're asking them to get this new Sega system, and they'd already been burned with the Sega Saturn and everything. So it's it was a hard sell. And then, like I said, they were coming out with the PS2 and the Xbox, and it kind of got left behind. And then, of course, the GameCube, but famously Nintendo, the GameCube discs were small, so they didn't really have much of a chance either to compete. And I think that's why the GameCube's not remembered as fondly as the Nintendo 64. But anyway, that's pretty much why the Dreamcast didn't last as long as it should have. The graphics were amazing. They had some amazing games, first-party games, and games that were on all systems. My top 20 list is pretty much games I've played. I believe I played them all now. There was a couple on I hadn't played until I started doing this research for this. Obviously, like I said, I played them on emulators, so not the the old Dreamcast experience is the best I could recreate with a computer and Xbox 360 controller hooked up to it, mapped out to Dreamcast controls, of course. It'd be really cool if they came out with the Dreamcast computer controller. They had one for Nintendo 64, but the one I got was like really generic, so it don't work anymore. It just sits on the shelf. But I ended up getting a Dreamcast probably a month after it came. I think I got it for Christmas that year. Yeah, I did. Did I? No, it was the next year. Sorry. Next year I got it for Christmas. Because like I said, poor family, we couldn't, I ended up getting a Sega Genesis, what's called Sega Genesis 3, the third version of it, so it's a little more slimmed down and everything. By the way, completely off, well, it's sort of topic, but I found in the past with PS2 and PS3 that the slim and PS4, the slim versions that come out later on almost are always longer lasting than the original versions. Like I said, I had original PS4, the one that's shiny. I had a couple of them that got fried quickly, but the one got now going on 10 years or something is still going strong. But anyway, on this I like to ramble. Sorry. I know it's supposed to be a top 20 countdown of Dreamcast games, and I'm talking about how well the PS4 is. But yeah, I don't even want to get started on PlayStation and their latest crap of their next, I guess, PS6. It'll be there will be no physical copies of games. Wouldn't surprise me if they don't even have a physical system. If they just put it all on phone or some crap. Who knows what they'll do? But that, and they're taking away, people bought digital movies and they're just taking them away. I love to go back to the days when you own the game. First of all, it's a physical disc. I mean, I have no problem with digital things if people want to own it. But the big problem is if they decide they want to take that away from you, or they're going to shut down a server, maybe your digital copy won't work anymore where the physical one might. These days, I don't know. Like I said, you got to have internet now to connect to everything. So, and if you don't go on the internet in 30 days, sometimes you can't use the license to play a game, even if you physically own it. It's maddening. Like I said, back in the good old days, you buy the game, you own it. There's no DLC, and I know there's good qualities to DLC. You can have more stuff, and I think originally that was the intent. Was we can release this stuff for a small fee to keep the game going and you keep the fans happy. It's like, well, you get new stuff, something you couldn't do in the past. Once the game's out, the game's out. Well, it turns out that that's actually the way to go, because nowadays they will purposely hold stuff back that could have been included in the game just to get your money. It's ridiculous. And like I said, I love to go back to these old days. The Sega Dreamcast, like I said, great system. If you don't know anything about it, definitely look it up. It's got an analog stick on the left side. It's got the D-pad, 4 colored buttons, 2 triggers, and then a start button. Nothing fancy. But the really cool thing about it is for a memory card, which everybody knows the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 memory cards, you're going to fill them up quickly. Same with this one, but they had something different besides just a memory card. It went into the controller and had a screen on it, and it actually had its own little buttons on it. Looked resembled a little tiny video game. Almost remind me of a Tamagotchi, digital pets type thing. And really, that's what you could do on the main game that you could play on it was for Sonic Adventure. It had other games that utilized that feature. Not feature. I can't talk. Not future feature. Okay, there we go. Back on track. Hit myself in the head. Get my brain going again. But it's called a VMU, Visual Memory Unit, and it not just only could you play games on it from different games like mini games and stuff. You could also link them up, the end of the connections that go into the controller actually can connect to another person, so you could actually play them in games. But the one feature that everybody used it for, no matter what game you had, was for a memory card. Because that's right, it could be a memory card. And I believe they did have regular memory cards, I think, that weren't VMUs, I think. But I know one of the big problems with the VMU famously is that it ran off a watch battery, and they never lasted long. So a lot of people that had VMUs, their batteries ran out, and unless you're like an avid player of a game on the VMU, you didn't really bother with replacing it. It still worked as a memory card when plugged in the controller. You didn't have to have it, have the battery. But anyway, that's pretty much just to tell you about the Dreamcast. It was an amazing system, still is in my mind, and I wish they would have kept it going a little bit longer, but when Xbox came out, they started having even more powerful games, and the Dreamcast really couldn't catch up. Some of the PS2 and Xbox games are right on Dreamcast level, but some of the ones that came out later on, it just was too much for them to compete with. So let's get going with that countdown I was talking about now. Coming in at number 20.
Game rated T for teen.
Yeah, I'm here for my license.
Get behind that yellow line!
Yeah, I know. License, please.
You better get out of my face! And I gotta get your punk license back!
I
Look what I got on you! You drive through the mall, the subway, city line, you like a direct
That was some big air.
What's your problem?
Hey, that's what I get paid for. I made some serious cake that day.
Crazy Taxi on Sega Dreamcast. It's thinking.
20 is a game that I believe it's the third biggest selling Dreamcast game of all time. But it's a game I never actually played except for a demo. I believe it was a demo disc for Xbox, actually. But Crazy Taxi, one of the, like I said, the third highest selling Dreamcast game of all time. It was made by Sega. It was originally an arcade game. And then it got ported to Sega the next year. And then, of course, there was a sequel that was also on Dreamcast. But that also went, along with, that with the original game, went to PlayStation, Nintendo 60, I believe Nintendo 64. If not, it was computer. But then it was also on PS2 and Xbox. And then there's been a bunch of sequels. But basically, if you've never played it before, you're driving around and picking up people and taking them for rides as a taxi cab. But it's a little bit more than that, because you're encouraged to do different crazy stunts, and you get points and money. And it's increasingly more difficult as you go. Like I said, I don't have a ton of experience playing it. Played the first level on demo all the time, and just started playing it recently. But it's a really fun game, and it really shows you what you can do with the Dreamcast engine as far as graphics. Like, the graphics are amazing on this. There's one game where the graphics are the best, and I'll get into that obviously towards the end of this. Spoiler alert, it's my number one game. And I'm not saying what it is yet, but the graphics on that are just like, to me, they hold up till today. But next, we're going to go to number 19. At number 19 is another one of those games that I only recently played, because I wanted to play it forever once I realized it existed. I didn't realize it existed until after the Dreamcast was well done, like I'm going to cook it. It was pretty much cooked. No, but ECW Anarchy Rules. It's our first wrestling game on this countdown, and the hit for this wrestling game and the two others that are on here. There's four games on here that are wrestling games. Spoiler alert. 3 of them are run off of this Acclaim engine, and it's notoriously bad as far as not just graphically, but the controls. The controls got to be the worst part of this. I know I'm saying this game's on the list and I'm giving all the bad stuff, but the controls notoriously are just crappy for these Acclaim wrestling games. You can also include the one game that's not on here because it wasn't on Dreamcast, and that's WWF Warzone. It was on Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1. But everybody who's played those Acclaim wrestling games knows that you don't even, unless you memorize the moves, it's like button combinations. It's not like the good Nintendo 64, No Mercy, WCW NWO Revenge, those type of wrestling games where, you can remember, you had to memorize, maybe which move to do in a certain position, like you got to remember which one is a suplex if you wanted to do a suplex. But pretty much you just you hit the button for grapple, or you press on it for strong grapple. Same concept with the SmackDown games on PlayStation 1. It was really easy to pick up, but on these Acclaim games, you couldn't just push a button to do a move. You got to do left, right, X, left, right, this, or sometimes there was even left, right, X, left, right. There was strings of combinations, and the special moves were like 3 or 4 of them. It's like, it's a lot of guesswork. If you ever played Mortal Kombat and didn't memorize buttons, and that's pretty much how I played these Acclaim wrestling games. But there's another ECW game that's on here that I've played a whole lot, so it's higher up on the list. But also, I still think it's a little bit better. Bug flying in my mouth. That's a nice, stupid fly. But anyway, this game does have a lot more match types than the Hardcore Revolution, the other ECW game. Like, there's a brimstone match where you can throw people literally out into fire. Some different things. The blood effects are crazy on this. Like, you get hit in the head with a weapon and it looks like you're just like buckets of blood come out of you, even though you don't see them come out. You get picked up off the ground and there's a giant blood stain. But anyway, the reason I have this ranked lower, not just because I played the other game more, but this game is newer, but it also doesn't have the really good roster that Hardcore Revolution had. No Taz, no Sabu. Some of the wrestlers had moved on to different companies by then. So, it's not really their fault per se, but as far as game experience, like, if I'm going to judge it, my dog down there, if I'm going to judge it by game experience and not just my experience with it, I still would put this lower on the list. But, it's fun to certain degrees and fun to play around with this stuff and, create wrestlers, because the Acclaim always had really crazy masks, and you have like a dinosaur head. But as far as like the gameplay, it's bad. I can't say anything other than it's bad. But let's move on to now number 18. Number 18 is Daytona USA. This was a game that I'd only played demo of the Daytona track, the first track. It was originally an arcade game, like a lot of games that come out back in the old days were. Some of them were arcade ports that got ported over to systems, and obviously it was put out by Sega, so it was going to be on the Dreamcast. But this is just a fun arcadey racing game. It kind of sucks that Dreamcast never got a NASCAR licensed game, because I think they would do really well. NASCAR 98 and NASCAR 2000, particularly for Nintendo 64, were really good games. I played hours and hours of those. But, so you're kind of limited on these to the tracks and cars. And of course, like I said, it's not actual NASCAR. It's just, they're meant to be NASCARs, but not, obviously not branded or anything. So, and of course, being a arcade port, you're only going to have so many things. And one of the things that bugs me about it is checkpoints. Like, if I'm doing a race, I don't want to have to do a stupid checkpoint. I always hate race games with checkpoints. It annoys me for some reason. But I realize why they're there for arcade games, of course. They want you to not get that checkpoint, so you got to put more quarters in. But I think when they did these arcade ports, they really should have done more with them as far as like expanding the game. Like with Crazy Taxi, there's a lot more to that game than the original arcade game. But this game is pretty much just spot on a transfer over from arcade. I really think they could have done a lot more with it, and of course some NASCAR branding on it would have been amazing too. But it's still a really fun racing game. Basic for come out in like 2000, somewhere in there between that 99 and 2001 area. The only 2 years Dreamcast was around. But like I said, it was a little bit limited what you could do, but still a pretty fun simulation at that. Number 17 is a game I never even realized existed until last week, and it is a Sonic Shuffle is sort of like, is basically Sega's equivalent of Mario Party. Anybody that knows me and my brothers, we played the absolute crap out of Mario Party 2, because it was, out of the 3 Mario Parties on Nintendo 64, that's just the one our parents got us. Sometimes they got us like these just random games that they'd find on discount or something, but so we had some of the most fun with those. But yeah, this was so much fun, the Mario Party games. So I was wanting to see how this one held up, and unfortunately this one is no Mario Party, and I realize I've only played one game on it, so it's, you know, it's kind of hard to say, you know, well, you know, you played Mario Party 2 countless hours, and I've even played a little bit of Mario Party 1 and 3 since on, you know, on emulator. But it's just, the gameplay on it is not as good. It's more confusing to find where the things are. The things, I can't remember what they're called. They're like these little emerald or jewels you have to find, as opposed to like in Mario Party you had to find the star. But, you know, you got to go under, on the first level is the Emerald Coast, which is based on the, you know, the classic Emerald Coast level from Sonic Adventure. But it's, you know, you got to figure out which way to go. And whereas in Mario Party you moved around by hitting a dice block, in this everybody has, all the 4 players. If you're playing, you know, I believe it only has 4 players at once. I don't know if you can have just 2, but anyway, you have a set of cards set out, and you can just pick the cards from anywhere. So I don't know what the point of each person having their own cards next to them is. I haven't figured out if there's a point to that or not. But there's a number under it, and then you go it, and it's just, you know, it's not as fun as without the dice block. But the mini games is really where there's a difference. There's a lot of confusion in the mini games, because there's a lot of times it says what to do and you go to do it and it just does not work, or it, you know, you're doing what it says, but you know, it's, the directions are confusing, or the game's confusing. Like there's one point where you duel with somebody and you got to pick numbers, and it's like the lowest number wins, and the person with the highest number ended up winning, and vice versa. So, like I said, the mini games are they're nowhere near as fun to begin with, but they're confusing, which makes this game like really hard to play. Like Mario Party, I could, even if I didn't win every game, I was still competitive. And Sonic Shuffle, when I played it, dead last, ended up with like 3 coins, got none of the bonus things you get. So it was not a fun experience. I may play it again just to see, and there's also a story mode on it I haven't tried out yet to see, you know, maybe that'll make it more fun. But as of right now, if you compare that to Mario Party, there's a reason why I've never heard of this game before, and I've heard of Mario Party. Obviously, Mario Party is still going on, and they never made another Sonic Shuffle that I'm aware of. If I'm wrong, let me know.
You've taken her abuse.
Miss Patrick, shut up, kid!
Now stick it up her tailpipe with South Park Rally, the racing game of demented proportion.
Respect my authority!
I wish I were dead.
Hit the streets packing outrageous weapons like explosive diarrhea.
报道为之 victory!
Defend your drawers from underwear gnomes and other wicked obstacles.
You go, girl.
So break like the wind with Comedy Central's South Park Rally, the video game. New from Acclaim.
Finisher, dude!
16 is a game that I'd only previously played on Nintendo 64 and on emulator at that, and that's South Park Rally. This is a fun game. It is so much fun. It's obviously just like the last game was meant to be a Mario Party clone. This was meant to be a Mario Kart clone. And I still would give the nod to the Mario Kart games because the controls and everything runs much smoother on that, I believe. But still, South Park Rally is a lot of fun to play. Obviously you got the characters from South Park, and you got your unlockables you can get, and just the bathroom humor, whatever you want to call it, of South Park is on full display here. This is early in the South Park run, so there, it's still all the classics are in there that everybody was used to whenever South Park became like huge, and everybody was quoting it at school. But yeah, a lot of replayability and a lot of great tracks, and just so much fun in this. And speaking of South Park,
Somewhere, someone tries to party alone.
Would you like some more tea, Polly Prissy Pants? Yes, sir. Coronation tea.
Don't let this happen to you. Join the party at South Park Chef's Love Shack, the video game, where you and your friends get down for some major four-player fun with the Love Gourmet himself.
Ooh, chef!
So get on over to the Shack. It's one big multiplayer love-in. Comedy Central's South Park Chef's Love Shack, the video game.
Ooh, naughty.
From Acclaim.
number 15, I believe this is the first one on my list that I actually used to own the physical copy of, and that is South Park's Chef's Love Shack. It is it's a combination game where you start off and you think it's just like a game show type thing. The chef is the host, and you compete against other people or the computer and answering questions, and some of them are a little risque sounding, and or the categories are, and some of the questions are normal questions. So that kind of that in itself reminds me of the You Don't Know Jack games, which I used to love and still love. I bought I think like 8 of the very first of the games on Steam. I think it's the only thing I've ever bought on Steam, and I have them on my computer, and it's so much fun playing those. All the innuendos, and Sometimes the questions are raunchy, sometimes they're actually not, and they just make them seem like it. But where this separates from just game show type thing is it also incorporates parts of Mario Party, and it does it a lot better than Sonic Shuffle did. And that's the mini games at the end of the rounds, or when they come up on the thing. Can't remember which. But yeah, they have a lot of mini games, and these are easier to understand, a lot more fun to play. There's all the crazy stuff you'd expect from South Park. So if you had this and the South Park Rally, you had 2 really fun games to play. I guess those are considered like party type games. Games that they encourage you to play, and you'd have more fun playing with friends. I mean, they're still fun to play on your own, but it's still especially like with Mario Kart and those type of games, Mario Party. It's a lot of fun to play that with people as opposed to just yourself.
Here we go. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's get it on!
And at number 14, a game I also used to own, Ultimate Fighting Championship. I believe, unless I'm wrong, that this is the very first UFC game. And I remember this was a lot of fun to play. You got to do some button combinations, but nowhere near like the Acclaim wrestling games. It's pretty much just a basic UFC game from back in like either 2000, 2001. There's punches and kicks, and then you get them down on the ground, and you try to snap their arm or choke them out, or and it's just the basic type of game like that. You've seen it 100 times in like boxing games and stuff. I haven't played any recent UFC games. I don't know when the last one came out, but I guarantee they're a lot more advanced than this. But it's really all it needed to be. You just get some fighters, you just get on there, and sort of like remind me of just like a Mortal Kombat type thing. Except all done with like the UFC. I would have liked to see like more people in it, and maybe some classic UFC guys. But at this time, UFC wasn't like as big as it is now. It was getting there. They went from the early days when they were basically had no rules, and they had to end up changing that. into what it is, to the conglomerate it is today, where, it's as popular as some major sports. I'm not personally a fan of it. I don't know. That and boxing, I just never... That stupid slap fighting. I'm getting off on a tangent here. I don't like, things that just... People just beating each other senseless. It just seems stupid to me. And yes, I'm a wrestling fan, but there's a difference there. There's a reason I like wrestling, and I don't like the other things. And it's not like, oh, violence. It's just... It all just seems pointless to me. But I know there's a lot of people that like it, so I'm not insulting you. Like I said, but the video game itself... A lot of fun to play, sort of like a Mortal Kombat style game, and just a lot of fun to play. Now a second of the Acclaim games, WWF Attitude. Of course, this was also on PS1 and Nintendo 64, but it was the very first WWF game, the first of two, on the Dreamcast. And like I said, what I said about Anarchy Rules, pretty much the same. It's all the same engine they started with WWF Warzone a few years earlier, just updated rosters. And this one has a little bit more in it, not just, Warzone. Like, if you compared Warzone to Attitude, obviously Attitude is better, not just because of updated rosters, but there's a little bit more when it comes to match types, and you can create a pay-per-view on there, and not really a story mode. It's just kind of just like a, just like you wrestle somebody, advance to the championship, that type of story mode. Whereas, some of the later wrestling games, like, WWF Shut Your Mouth, Here Comes the Pain, SmackDown games, and then Raw versus SmackDown and all those, they ended up having, like No Mercy for Nintendo 64. They ended up having, like, stories. This is just like a linear, wrestle somebody, you beat them, you move on, that type of thing. But still, it's a lot of fun to play, but like I said, the button combinations just make it so... hard to actually play this. You do a championship mode. There goes my dog again. You do a championship mode, and you wrestle as the same person. You get to memorizing some of the moves, but like, if you're gonna go from, I don't know, being Stone Cold, you're playing against your friend. You go to Stone Cold against whoever. Next time you're Undertaker. Next time you're Kane. Whatever. You gotta remember, because it's not always the same moves. It's all different stuff, even just basic stuff. And there's like basic moves that they have that anybody can do, but they're always like these little like hip tosses and everything, and they don't do much damage at all. And that's another thing about these Acclaim games. You knock somebody down, they get like almost right back up, sometimes before you're even up from doing the move, and they're right there to reverse. Even if you don't do a move, they hit you. It's like they reverse, you don't even do nothing, and they're already reversing. So many reverses in this, and even on the easiest mode, the computers are like hard to face. Like, it is hard to win these games. You combine that with the just trying to remember what the moves are, even knowing what the moves are, you can't pull them off half the time. It's funny that I complain about this, but it's on the list. But because I did have a lot of fun with it, but. It's just because it's what was available. If there would have been another game out, WCW didn't have any Dreamcast games. If they would have came out with some of the games on the Aki THQ engine that they had for, WCW NWO Revenge, before WWF got the contract and got WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy. If WCW would have came out with those games then, man, they would have been off the charts. But yeah, Acclaim and wrestling games really did not stack up well, except WrestleMania the arcade game. I believe Acclaim did that. If they didn't, then it, I don't know. But that game was a lot of fun to play. That game was easy to play. But the Acclaim wrestling games everybody knows about, Warzone, Attitude, Hardcore Revolution, and Anarchy Rules, hard to play.
Rated M.
90
ECW Hardcore Revolution, the video game, in stores now from Acclaim.
Acclaim in those games. Number 12 is ECW Hardcore Revolution. I do put this one slightly above Attitude because I played this one a lot more. Because I was a big fan of both companies, but ECW until that point, that was the first time you got to play an ECW game, and and it had barbed wire matches. You can replace the ropes with barbed wire and stuff like that you couldn't do in the other ones, and it was like the coolest thing ever. And another thing I forgot to mention about these Acclaim games is when they come out to the ring right before they match, they all have sayings. The ECW ones are some of the funniest sayings ever. But the creator wrestler mode in this I thought was even better. And then the match types, like I said, and that I loved playing with Sabu on there because he was my all-time favorite ECW guy. And there's a infamous story that me and my brothers know. My very first Dreamcast I had, the one I got for Christmas in 2000, I was playing the crap out of ECW, and first of all, before any of that, I didn't have a VMU, so I had to keep the game on for the games I was playing. If I was in the middle of something that needed to be saved and I couldn't because I didn't have a memory card, I had to keep the game on all night. So that probably led to part of what happened. But I was playing an ECW game. It was about November, I believe, of the next year. So yeah, 2001. And I remember it was November because of why when I get to the point in the story. But I was playing ECW, just making a random crazy wrestler, because whenever I make characters on wrestling games, I always make the craziest looking people. Like sometimes I'll make one that tries to look like me, but a lot of times it'll just be crazy people. Sometimes their arms will be longer than their, I don't know, they're crazy. But anyway, I made this character and I turned him all blue. My dogs are wondering, hi Snuggles! Hold on a second. Snuggles! Snuggles! My dog Snuggles, I swear, half the time I think she's blind, even though she's not. Anyway, I turned this character blue, and as soon as that got to the 100% of the blue, it froze. I was like, oh, great. So I went to turn it off. It wouldn't turn off. I was like, okay, I've never seen that before. So I unplugged it. I was like if I unplug this and it's still on, something's haunted. But anyway, long story short, I plugged it back in, and it never turned on again. Yeah, completely. I don't know if it was something about that. I've told this story on my regular podcast before. By the way, check that out if you want to. It's Tales from the 90s. I pick a random month and year of the 90s and talk about it. Sorry, enough advertising. But yeah, never turned on again. And like I said, it was November, and unbeknownst to me, my mom and stepdad Steve had already bought me a bunch of games, that South Park, Love Shack, and UFC, I believe, were a couple of them. Had already bought me a couple games for Christmas. So it was and like I said, this had been after Dreamcast had been discontinued. So it wasn't like they were readily everywhere. So I fried it, and they're like without, telling me really, even though I could kind of sense what was going on. It's if I don't have a Dreamcast, they bought these games for nothing, and they really can't take them back because they were on clearance because it was discontinued. So they call around and find the last Dreamcast, it seems, in Cincinnati that someone had on sale still. It was out at we lived in Norwood, and it was at the Kenwood Town Mall. And we had to go, me and my brother Josh went on bus and went there and picked it up and got it before somebody else actually got there and got it. In other words, so that way the Christmas presents they got me wouldn't go to waste, but I'm lucky they were able to find that. But being me, what do you think the first thing I do when I got this Dreamcast home? That's right. Put it back on Hardcore Revolution, made that same character and turned him all blue, and held my breath. And for a second, I thought it stuttered just a little bit, but then everything was fine. And, if I would have broke that again, I think my mom and my stepdad would have just wrung my neck completely. But yeah, I had to try again. I'm going to do that on emulator. Just if I break my computer, people, and you don't see more podcasts from me, well, you're welcome, I guess. Anyway. Coming in at number 11 is just a really simple game called Coaster Works. Everybody's more familiar with I can't remember if it's called Theme Park Tycoon or something like that, but famously Railroad Tycoon, and they came out with one for theme parks. Where you actually build not just roller coasters, but all the attractions, and you put in the ticket booth and that type of stuff. Well, this is a little different. This just focused on building roller coasters, starting off with the really basic ones, and then each level are progressing into more twists and turns and loops and everything later on. But you had to build it to where it actually ran, and it actually included physics in this, which is really cool. You didn't have to know the physics other than just eyeballing it. If you're going to put a hill, it barely goes up and then goes down, and then expect it to climb up a hill on its own. It goes up a hill at first, like a roller coaster does when it's pulled up the first hill. But everything after that is supposed to be, gravity taking it everywhere. Well, basically they incorporated this into this game, and it had to stay in a certain level. Each level, it couldn't go above a certain height. It couldn't obviously hit the invisible wall there, because you're in this space you had to stay in as part of this. And it also, you couldn't have it go like this and then such a sharp turn that in reality it would cause the train to come off the tracks, basically. And that's happened a few times on there, because you build the coaster, if it meets all the specifications and makes a complete circuit, but then you go to test it, and it's got to pass certain qualifications, it's got to go a certain amount of G's, it's got to it can't be too unsafe, and it's got to have a certain speed on each level. But it's just a really fun game, really easy to pick up, and I said basic game, but still, it's number 11 on my list over a few wrestling games that I played all the time. Shows you how much I love this game, and just wish they come out with something like this updated for nowadays. And if you want to include it with a full, like I said, I never played that. I don't know if it was called Theme Park Tycoon. That don't sound right. Roller Coaster Tycoon. That's what it was. It's right on top of my head. I don't know, as far as I've never played that game, so I don't know. You guys might know whether you had to include physics in that, or if it followed any of that, or if it was more just about building roller coasters and the overall theme park. But still, a lot of fun with Coaster Works.
They're lining up. A lot of heavy machinery out there. Call the insurance company, because we're about to do some property damage today.
Here comes the snap. Matthews back, rolling right. Can't find his man. Here comes the blitz. Simmons.
The one game that hits so hard, your mama's mama will feel it. NFL Blitz 2000 from Midway. New 4-player mode, customizable play editor, and more sledgehammer quality fun than ever.
Oh, mama, tuck me in. I'm ready to go. Night-night.
Alright, we've reached the top 10, and coming in at number 10, a game I played a whole lot on Nintendo 64, so I'm basing it on that experience. I've never played the Dreamcast version, but I guarantee it's just as good from the reviews I've seen anyway. NFL Blitz 2000. Man, what can I say about NFL Blitz? I love simulation, technical, whatever you want to call it, versions of football games, like the 2K series, which is obviously on this list. Madden, older Madden games anyway. Not old Madden like Nintendo 64 Madden, but PS2 days of Madden, PS2 and PS3 days. But anyway, I love those type of games, but there's just something that's so much fun about NFL Blitz, where the rules are relaxed. It's 30 yards to a first down, which makes it seem like it's a lot harder. But when you realize it's 30 yards are just a couple seconds, and because it's an arcadey game. It was originally an arcade game too, but it's so much fun, and you can beat up people after the play, and you can do pass interference all you want. It's just, and it's a game that you can I literally played this game on I believe it was an Xbox. I don't remember which year it was, but I played it against my kids, and they would sometimes beat me, and I was trying. So it's a game that any age can pick up and play. You don't have to have a big understanding about football. They have the playbook and everything, but I mean, you can tell by the playbook what you're supposed to do. It doesn't take much skill at all to play. Although I'm sure it does take skill to play at a high level or anything, but I'm just talking about, just a average, everyday pick up the game for the first time. You can have a lot of fun with it. You don't need to know anything about football, but it does have, the NFL teams on it. Man, I wish they'd could make a modern day version of NFL Blitz, but of course, EA and Madden own the NFL trademark for life, it seems, at this point. Coming in at number 9 is another football game, NCAA College Football 2K2. I had this game. It was so much fun to play. It was fun to play games with as the mascots, because you can actually play as the mascots for the college teams. But this was my first experience playing a college football game, and it was actually around this time I started watching college football. Before then, I'd only watched NFL. But from 2000 on, I had started watching college football. Of course, my favorite team is Ohio State, thanks to my dad and my grandpa. And just so much fun playing these games. I love the different stadiums, because they had, I can't remember whose field, but it has the really blue grass. There's some that have just all the distinct things that are in all these different college football stadiums. And like I said, you can also play as the mascots, which is really funny to play with as a whole team of mascots. And it's got the 2K football engine, which is, in my opinion, the greatest football engine ever created. What more can I say about this game? Is just, you can go through, drafting teams, recruiting, I should say, more recruiting than drafting. You recruit teams to your college, and you go out and you try to win the national championship, and just, man, so much fun.
It's the inbounds pass. Schmitz leans in. Booyah!
Coming at number 8 is NBA. Basketball in general is a sport I don't normally follow. I'll follow college basketball during March Madness. Well, my teams, Ohio State, and to a certain extent, UC, University of Cincinnati, and Xavier, which is also a Cincinnati college. But outside of that, I don't watch basketball at all. I don't watch the NBA at all. But there's been a few games. My favorite NBA game of all time was NBA. Kobe Bryant, I believe was it Courtside? I know there was 2 of them, but the first one for Nintendo 64, I believe it was called Courtside, but it's Kobe Bryant basketball, one of the 2. Maybe there's a combination there, but that was my favorite basketball game of all time. This is my second one, the NBA Tonight. Just so, again, like a lot of these on this list, it's so easy to pick up and play. You just learn, which buttons to hit, which is pass, which is shoot, and all this stuff. And just, you can play through, you can just play exhibitions, against people. You can play against a computer, you can do seasons. It's just so much fun, and just I own this game. It's like one of those random games. Probably I got that year. Actually, it was that year that my mom and stepdad got me in 2001. Got me just, you know, a bunch of random games that were left on sale from, you know, when they discontinued the Dreamcast. And just, you know, one that I probably wouldn't have bought myself, but I'm glad I had it because I got to have so much fun with it. And obviously it made it so high on the list is because, you know, I spent hours and hours playing this game. Number 7 is World Series Baseball 2K2. Although 2K1 could be just right there with it. I didn't want to put both on the list because they're sort of similar. Not just, you know, 2K2 has the more updated roster, but there's a lot of similarities. But the franchise mode on these are so much fun. You can go... It's the first ones, I believe, that you could actually go, like, decades into, like, a franchise instead of just, you know, a couple seasons here and there. You know, you can see players retire and, you know, draft new players. And I had so much fun playing this. And, of course, you know, they had the newer ballparks on it at the time. And one of my favorite games is All-Star Baseball for Nintendo 64. And both that and this one of my favorite things to do is try to hit a home run in the pool in the Diamondbacks ballpark. They have a pool out there in the outfield, and on these games, you can, if you hit the ball in there, you can actually hit it into the pool. It's pretty cool. Same with San Francisco Stadium, where you can actually hit the ball out into the San Francisco Bay. It is, you know, around this time they were making these ballparks on these video games like more interactive, not just, you know, because you remember from the Sega Genesis days, if you're playing one of those games, they're fun, but you know, you hit the ball into the outfield, you know, sometimes it'll just like, you know, it'll hit like the whatever the thing is in the outfield that it would hit, and it just almost sometimes you see the ball like go into the wall, like as far as like, you know, just pass through it basically. They started putting a lot more realism during this time, so you could actually you know, when you hit the ball, it would hit something in the outfield, you know, over the wall like a concrete beam, and it would actually bounce. Whereas before, it was just, like I said, just basically just like pass through it like it was just not there. I know that's a little thing and doesn't really like affect gameplay, but it adds that little bit of realism. It's like, wow, this is a really cool game just because I can see a ball bouncing off a concrete beam, you know. Just little things like that always seem to appeal to me. Like I said, you know, with this realism, with Blitz, obviously, you know, you don't have the realism, and that's the fun part of it there, is just the crazy attacking people after the thing. I never played Slugfest, which is the baseball equivalent of Blitz, you know, by the same company, but I almost guarantee that was a lot of fun to play. Someday I hope to check that one out. Number 6 is a game type that I never really liked before and never really played since. But since this is another one of those random games, I believe I got this 2000 when I first got the Dreamcast, but it's called Sword of the Berserk Guts Rage. And it is a, like, I believe it's a Japanese type game where you got this sword and you're fighting all these monsters, and like I said, not a type of game that I would normally play. But this is actually one I actually beat, I'm proud to say. Everybody knows me, I love playing video games, but I suck at them most of the time. But, this one, me and my wife actually beat it on Dreamcast years later because I needed her help to get through some levels, and, she needed me to help to get through other levels. But yeah, Sword of the Berserk is just, basically a hack and slash. You're, killing all these demons and zombies and gross-looking monsters with swords, and there's one level where you're, like, going like this towards the camera, and the stuff's coming behind you, and just, I don't know, just something about that game that I love. Like I said, it's not my normal cup of tea. It's not a game that I never in a million years would have picked that up and played. Like, if I was even though it was a friend's house, unless that's the game they had on playing, if they're like, pick a game, I wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't be like, I want to play that. That would have probably been one of the lower on my list. But I had so much fun playing this, and, it's so easy to do as well. It's not like it's a super difficult game, that it placed really highly on my list here. Now we're into the top 5. Number 5 is WWF Royal Rumble, the only wrestling game on my list that wasn't an Acclaim game. This was actually done by the THQ, the same people that did the WWF SmackDown, and of course No Mercy and WrestleMania 2000 before that. But you can really tell by looking at the gameplay of this game that it looks like a WWF SmackDown on PlayStation 1 game. But it's an arcade port from, where they're really kind of held back from being a great game just by the fact that, there's very few match types. It's focused mostly on the Royal Rumble. But I remember this is the first time you could have an actual Royal Rumble with many people in the ring. Before it was up to 4. I can't remember if it was 6 or 8 on this one. But also, it's also limited on the roster. So there isn't even 30 wrestlers on this. So you'll be doing a 30-man Royal Rumble, and you'll see the same wrestler come back out 3 or 4 times sometimes. Because like I said, it's a very small roster because it was just an arcade game. Arcade generally, like with wrestling games and fighting games, they have a certain amount of, lower amount of people that you pick and a lower amount of match types, because it's all, you got to pay money to play it, and, nobody's going to go to the arcade and sit there and play for hours like a console. So, like I said, it's really held back by that, but I really like the graphics to it. There's a lot of fun stuff, like you'll have, even if you're in a singles match, you'll have a manager out there, and you'll hit a button, and it makes a whistling sound, and they'll come in, and maybe you'll distract the referee, or they'll distract the referee, and there'll be weapons involved, depending on there's like 3 or 4 buttons, and it's real easy to, you can go to the pause button and hit, or pause it, go to the menu and look to see which is your controls for that. But as far as like the actual wrestling, actual, good wrestling quality, you don't have to remember 70,000 combinations, and even when you do them right, they don't work. I love this game. I just really wish that it would have been a full port, that they would have, but by the time this was coming out, I believe, Dreamcast was on its way out anyway. But if they would have had more and plus they were more focused on their Nintendo 64 and their PlayStation 1, if to be honest, No Mercy was a major hit. SmackDown was a major hit. This one was just sort of like, well, we'll throw Dream. Those games are exclusive to that. We'll take that arcade game we got. It's like, they could tell that Sega Dreamcast was on their way out and didn't really want to put more effort into it, which is sad because this game could have been an all-time classic. But as it is, I still have it on number 5 on my list just because it's so much fun to play, even with so few options.
I've broken a lot of bones learning tricks like these. All you gotta break is a sweat.
Introducing Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX. With 12 courses and over 1,300 tricks, you get all of Dave's moves and none of his scars. Rated E.
Number 4 is Dave Mirra BMX Freestyle. Man, I have played this game so many times. Back in the days when I didn't have a memory card and had to leave it on. But, back then, skateboarding and BMX trick bikes were in style. I still love the regular mountain bikes. It's what I always wanted, a mountain bike. Because, I ride bikes for fun, and I know going up a hill is a lot easier to do on a mountain bike than on, these BMX trick bikes that my brother Josh and Travis, they love those, the smaller bikes that are made more for doing tricks, the big pegs that, originally were made for people to stand on, but then, when all this extreme sports like skateboarding and everything came out, they started doing the tricks by put your feet on the pegs and stuff like that. But this game, Dave Mirra was like one of the biggest names in like BMX biking, and the game is so much fun. It has a lot in common with Tony Hawk, which by the way didn't make my list, but I played the crap out of Tony Hawk, the first Tony Hawk, and the first level that was on this. It was a green disc that came with the Dreamcast. It was called Generator. It was a demo disc. Now, for some reason, it had the first level of Sonic on it, too, even though Sonic was a launch title with Dreamcast. But anyway, I played the crap out of that. And, of course, I played it on Nintendo 64. I didn't include it on my list just because I suck at it, for one, but also just limited playing on Dreamcast and just other ones I wanted to put on here. But I just wanted to do a special mention. But this BMX, Dave Mirra BMX, was so much fun doing the different levels. It's actually a game that I was able to actually beat. Those are few and far between, as we've established on here. But one of the characters you get when you beat it is actually, if you guys remember that the 2000s era Slim Jim mascot, it was after they stopped doing the Macho Man snub to a Slim Jim mascots, and they had the crazies, like basically the guy was a Slim Jim that had the big hair. You could actually unlock him in this, and he's riding around on a Slim Jim bike. So it's like you're playing with a giant Slim Jim doing tricks. But just so much fun at this game. Different levels. It's like I said, it's like a Tony Hawk. You had to do achieve different points or certain types of tricks to unlock the next level. And like I said, one of the ones I was able to beat, and also one of the original games I had, because I remember keeping the system on forever until I accidentally turned it off, or felt like it was getting too hot. It's like, well, I guess I better turn it off. But once I got a VMU to use as a memory card, I was able to beat the game finally, and just so much fun. Still went back and played it even more because it's always fun.
We're the Crush Crew from Queens, New York, and we just crushed those tired Minnesota Vikings.
We burned Dwayne Run like his mom is nasty breakfast toast.
Somebody call the burn unit. What's happening, Dwayne?
Somebody help out Dwayne. Get NFL 2K1. Go online through Dreamcast and show them the web address. Look for Crush Crew and stomp these mullet-wearing, T-top driving hairballs. Stomp them.
We've reached the top 3 now. Number 3, NFL 2K1. My first experience with the 2K game was actually NFL 2K. I got it with the Dreamcast when I first got it. But 2K1, and I've also played 2K2, and it's fun too. But the general consensus with everybody, and including me, is that 2K1 was probably the best one. I will say that my favorite football game of all time is NFL 2K5, specifically for Xbox. Because on the Xbox you could actually put your own music on there, where you could actually use it in the game. You could actually play it. You have what's called a crib on that one, where you collect stuff throughout the game, and you can you can get posters, trophies. You can have a game room where you can play like paper football or air hockey and stuff like that. They even have like an old arcade game, I believe. But you could have music playing during that, and your own personal music downloaded on the Xbox. But also, you could create music to play during the game, and like specifically tailor it like for every fourth down, this song plays, and you have a little snippet of the song, or every time there's a touchdown, there's this song. But anyway, that's why I like that one best. And that was actually the game that came out the year, I believe, 2004, because it was when 2K5 came out. And Madden came out the same year. Madden 2005 was an amazing game. Or was it 2000? I can't remember if it was 2004 or 2005. I know it was NFL 2K5, but I can't remember. Anyway, the Madden that came out that year was still an amazing game, and I loved them both. I played them both. But Madden cost the $50, where the 2K games were priced at $20. And they way outsold Madden, and Madden was so mad about it that they signed a deal with NFL, give them a bunch of money basically to secure their license to where only Madden can have NFL. And it ruined the 2K franchise. They tried to continue on with I think it was called the 2K the League or something like that, where they tried to go on and play a football game without the NFL branding, but people didn't want to play that. They wanted the NFL name. So Madden got mad and threw money at NFL is basically what happened. But I know all that has nothing to do with the Dreamcast, but it's just my experience with the 2K games. I was wanting to let you guys know my favorite football game of all time. This is right up there, close to it though. Just those 2K games were so good. Like I said, the first one came out, NFL 2K. It was one of them ones I'd had on all night doing a franchise mode. But 2K1 just like really dialed in everything. Had so good graphics for the time, and the game was so easy to play too. That was another thing that was so easy to play, and it made it more fun to play. Not everything has to be a complete challenge. There's different levels you can put on it and make it harder against the computer. But I mean, if you're playing a football game, it shouldn't be, does this and this, and hope that the button you push is going to do what it's supposed to. This really dialed in the simulation aspect of playing a football game, as opposed to the super arcadey type where it's more cartoonish. And they presented it like in such a way that I even watched like the lead-ins to it. Like it looked like you were watching a real football game. They'd have announcers. I believe this is the first time they have announcers like welcome, and and they would have. I believe this was also. I never had mine connected to the internet, because I didn't have internet when I had this. But if you had it connected to the internet, they could actually like pull up the weather in the city that wherever you're playing that football game at, and pull up the weather for that day, and you could actually have what it's really doing outside. So if it's storming outside, in San Francisco or something, bad choice, would be more likely to storm in Seattle. So say it's pouring around rain in Seattle. If you have it connected to the internet and you're going to play a football and you have it set to weather, as in, I can't remember what the setting was called, but basically real life setting, it would do what the weather was doing, which is like mind blowing. And nowadays it's who cares? But back then that was like, that's really cool. They can actually tell what the weather is and make the game like that. It was, I don't know, it's just a lot of fun. But that's my favorite football game on the Dreamcast for sure, and one of the top 5 favorite football games of all time.
Subject A, good hedgehog. Subject B, evil hedgehog. Introducing Shadow from Sonic Adventure 2. Now you can choose to be Sonic, the good hedgehog, and try to save the world. Or Shadow, the evil hedgehog, and conquer it. What kind of hedgehog are you? Rated E for everyone, only on Dreamcast.
I'm getting the big hitters here. Number 2, Sonic Adventure 2. Got this game well after it'd come out. Didn't get this until like 2006, 2007 on... Probably got it on eBay, I think. The sequel to the first one. And, me and my wife played this, and we got stuck on the last, what we thought was the last level. We just couldn't get past it, and I ended up selling my Xbox, my Dreamcast to my brother Travis at one time. So, it's just because we needed the money, and he really wanted a Dreamcast. And we were, by the time we'd moved on, we were playing more PlayStation 2 and Nintendo Wii at the time. You know, so, and I didn't, you know, if I'd have realized, I would have said, sorry, Travis, I'm keeping my Dreamcast. You know, if I'd have realized how hard it would be to get one again. But anyway, the Sonic Adventure 2 is expanded on the first one to where, you know, the big story arc in this one is, you know, the introduction of Shadow, you know, which has been a big character in the Sonic franchise since then. But this is the very first game with Shadow. You sort of see his origins and how he was, like, you know, basically as the anti-Sonic, basically, but not really as, you know, wasn't evil as you can, you know, the story, you play the game and see the story, but, I mean, so much fun on these levels. The 3D Sonics on Dreamcast were the greatest Sonics ever created. It's probably obvious what my number one is by now, but yeah, this one is not as good as the very first one, but very close. And like I said, later on, like we sold the Dreamcast, and then later on ended up buying Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 for the PlayStation 3 store, which they're shutting that down soon anyway, so probably won't be able to play that anymore. But anyway, we finally beat it. And that level we were stuck at, we thought was the last level. There was actually a couple more after that, and it took months of playing that. But we finally beat that game. That was a fun achievement to get. But yeah, Sonic Adventure 2 is so great. In number one, as if it's no surprise, Sonic Adventure, the very first Sonic game released for Sega Dreamcast. Not the first 3D Sonic game. They experimented around with that, you know, a little bit with the Sonic 3D game, you know, to where I don't know if it might have been full 3D, but nothing like this. That very first opening shot with the cinematic feel of that game, like, it blew my mind, and still, like, I believe the graphics still hold up these days. Just the first time seeing that, and this game has so many layers to it. You know, I didn't have a lot of fun playing any of the original Sonic games for Sega Genesis, only because I have motion sickness problems sometimes, and just something about those Sonic games, because they go so fast across the screen, that they would give me headaches to where it would just not be enjoyable playing, so I never really did play them games much. But this one is a completely different animal here. It contained the speed, and I had like no trouble playing it at all, because it wasn't just, you know, from left to right across the screen. It was, you know, most of the time you're going one, so that made a big difference. But I mean, this game is so, like, so many different layers. It has, of course, Dr. Eggman, but he's also got this Chaos Monster that every time he gets more Chaos Emeralds gets bigger and bigger. The first level, Emerald Coast, is an iconic level. especially when you get turned around and this whale is chasing you. So where you're going like this on the camera at first. Well, on this part, it turns around. You're going this way, and the whale's coming after you. And basically, you don't have to do anything other than hold the controller button down. I believe it probably would work if you don't even do nothing, just as long as you don't hit anything. And it runs for you, basically. So you can avoid that thing. But, I mean, it's crazy. And, Sonic levels are just, running, basically to a goal. Trying to avoid enemies, collecting rings, of course. There's a great casino level where you gotta collect coins, and you gotta play by playing pinball, which is, of course, throwback to the Sonic Spinball game. One of my favorite Sonic games of all time, Sonic Spinball from Sega Genesis. Man, I freaking played the crap out of that game. I still have that on my computer. Like, I bought it from Amazon, like the computer version of it. Hopefully, it won't ever disappear. Like, they like to take stuff away from you. But anyway. That's a standout level in Casinopolis. Like I said, the very first one. But I mean, there's so many great levels in this. Speed Highway is a really good one. But the only one that was really confusing sometimes is that when you get on the Eggman ship, that sometimes you get a little confusing on there. But you can still figure it out. But then of course, there's 6 characters, I believe, and they all have their own stories to completely. 100% complete this game, you got to do all those stories. And Tails, a lot of his levels were you're basically racing Sonic, but there's also some levels where you're flying, and there's like a little, not mini games, but like mini levels where you're flying on a ship and you got to avoid enemies and stuff like that. Eggman trying to shoot you out of the sky. But like I said, that's most of the Tails stuff. And then of course Knuckles is in this, and he's got a whole other story about the Master Emerald, and he goes to the Mystic Ruins, and just like a flashback of hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and the story of like the Master Emerald and being split into pieces, and and his levels are all about finding the 3 little pieces of the emerald in each level, and it's like a hot and cold thing. You're further away, the emerald looks on the screen looks blue and like barely there, but the closer you get, it starts turning more towards orange and then red, and then it's like pulsing. Those are fun to play, except the later levels are really hard for me to find. Speaking of the ship, find the emeralds on that ship, it took me days and days and days to figure this out. And then you got Amy Rose, which is the little hedgehog. I think she's a hedgehog or something. She's obsessed with Sonic. But a lot of her levels are, basic levels are pretty much easy. And then there's the robot. It's E something. I can't remember the numbers, but it's basically one of Eggman's robots. But it like has a conscience, and it like turns good. So it's always fighting all against the other robots in its levels. And he runs really slow, but you can like shoot lasers with it. So that's kind of fun. The one I didn't enjoy the most was probably Big the Cat. I believe this is a game that introduced him, where Big the Cat with the fishing, because in all his levels he was fishing, and it's just because it was so hard for me to do. Like those are the ones I had the most trouble with. Not that it wasn't fun, it's just like I couldn't ever get the controls to work right for me. My wife breezed through those levels, and yes, we beat that game for the first time together. And actually, I beat that before her. Actually, come to think of it, a long time ago. But then we beat it together, and I probably beat that game like 4 different times, because once you get all those stories done, then you can do the Super Sonic level when he turns into Super Sonic. But yeah, just man, that game is so much fun. And of course, they've had some Sonic games since then that have Sonic Generations, and then I can't remember the latest one that came out, but they've had some really good Sonic games. But to me, nothing will ever beat Sonic Adventure. And nothing on Dreamcast will ever beat Sonic Adventure to me. Like I said, one of those ones that I had left on and had to leave it on because of, not having a memory card. But yeah, that and NFL 2K, I believe, are the very first 2 games I got. And like I said, I can't say enough about Sonic Adventure. It is so much fun. A countdown for the top 20 Sega Dreamcast games of all time. For next month's bonus episode, it's going to be August 4th. That's the first Tuesday, I believe, of the month. And it's just, I don't know of the exact number yet. But it's going to be, or if I'm even going to rank them. But talking about my favorite sports moments of the 90s. just from beginning of 1990 to the end of 1999, because August is baseball's getting on and towards the end of the season, football season getting ready to start. We're coming up on the 30-year anniversary of the 96 Olympics in Georgia, and I haven't got to tell that on podcast because I haven't covered August of 96 yet. But if I don't do it in between then, I'll be talking about my experience of actually getting to see the Olympic torch coming through Cincinnati and getting in trouble because I went way farther than I was supposed to on my bike. But just talk about some of the greatest sports moments of the 90s through football, baseball, NASCAR, the stuff I'm used to. Also, other sports, basketball. You can't talk about basketball without talking about Michael Jordan and the Bulls. Just whatever I can think to talk about. Just sports moments of the 90s. I may rank them. I'm not sure. If I do, it'll probably be a top 20 or a top 10 if I can't come up with 20. But anyway, that'll be next month. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and if you get a chance to play a Sega Dreamcast, either getting the physical Dreamcast, which is always the best, or through emulator, give some of those games a try. I believe there's 280 games that came out with North America for the Dreamcast, so not a ton, not nowhere near as many as like PlayStation and Nintendo 64, but still a lot of good games out there, and really showed you where the future of gaming was heading, because I believe Dreamcast really paved the way for in a lot of ways for PS2 and Xbox and into the future. To kind of end the story on the Sega Dreamcast, they discontinued it because like I said, they really couldn't keep up, and their system wasn't built towards the future because they had to rush it out. But so Sega, instead of deciding to come out with another system, decided to just to retire from consoles altogether and just focus on gaming, which they've come out with some good games since then, a lot of the Sonics and stuff, but nowhere near the success that they should have had. Sega these days is not, by the newer generation, isn't thought of as much, other than, oh yeah, don't they own that Sonic? Those are some good movies. That's all they're really thought of these days, when really they should have been much more, from where they were basically taking over Super Nintendo to, the Sega Dreamcast and into the future. But it's a story of what could have been, but also a story of what was, and what we got in that 2-year span was a lot of great games, and for me personally, a lot of great memories. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.